Mr. President, thank you very much for this opportunity to talk to you at a very important moment, because the President of the United States will address the nation this week. And as you know, important conversations taking place in Washington and important things are happening here in your country. Do you expect an airstrike?
As long as the United States doesn't obey the international law and trample over the Charter of the United Nations, we have to worry that any administration, not only this one, would do anything. But according to the lies that we've been hearing for the last 2 weeks from high-ranking officials in this administration, we have to expect the worst.
Are you prepared?
We've been living in difficult circumstances for the last 2.5 years, and we prepare ourselves for every possibility. But that doesn't mean if you're prepared, things would be better. It's going to get worse with any foolish strike or stupid war.
What do you mean worse?
Worse because of the repercussions, because nobody can tell what the repercussion of the first strike, or you're talking about one region, bigger region. It's not only about Syria. It's interlinked region. It's intermingled, interlocked, whatever you want to call it. If you strike somewhere, you have to expect the repercussions somewhere else in different forms, in a way that you don't expect.
Are you suggesting that if in fact there's a strike, there would be repercussions against the United States from your friends in other countries like Iran or Hezbollah or others?
Yeah, as I said, it may take different forms, direct and indirect. Direct when people want to retaliate, or governments. Indirect when you're going to have instability and the spread of terrorism all over the region that will influence the West directly.
Have you had conversations with Russia, with Iran, with Hezbollah about how to retaliate?
We don't discuss this issue as a government, but we discuss the repercussions, which is more important because sometimes repercussions could be more destroying than the strike itself. Any American strike will not destroy as much as the terrorist has destroyed in Syria. So sometimes the repercussions could be many doubles the strike itself.
But some have suggested that it might tip the balance in the favor of the rebels and lead to the overthrow of your government.
Exactly. Any strike will be as direct support to Al-Qaeda offshoot that's called Al-Nusra, Jabhat al-Nusra, and the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. You're right about this. It's going to be direct support.
This is about chemical warfare, and let's talk about that. Do you approve of the use of chemical warfare? Do you think that it is an appropriate tool of war to use chemical?
We are against any WMD, any weapons of mass destruction, whether chemical or nuclear. And
so you're against the use of chemical warfare?
Yeah, it's not only me. As a state, as a government, in 2001, we proposed to the United Nations a proposal to empty or to get rid of every WMD in the Middle East, and the United States stood against that proposal. So this is our conviction and policy.
But you're not a signatory to the chemical warfare
not yet
agreement.
Why
not?
Because Israel has WMD and it has to sign, and Israel occupying our land. So that's why we talked about Middle East, not Syria, not Israel. It should be comprehensive.
Do you consider chemical warfare equivalent to nuclear warfare?
I don't know. We haven't tried either.
Yeah, but you know, you're a head of state and you understand the consequences of weapons that don't discriminate.
Technically, they're not
beyond.
Yeah, technically they're not the same, but morally it's the same.
Morally, they're the same.
They have the same, but at the end, killing is killing.
And it's
mass killing is mass killing.
Yes.
Sometimes you may kill tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands with very primitive armaments.
Then why do you have such a stockpile of chemical weapons?
We don't discuss this issue in public because we never said that we have it, and we never said that we don't have it. It's a Syrian issue. It's a military issue. We never discussed in public with anyone.
This is from the New York Times this morning. Syria's leaders amassed one of the world's largest stockpiles of chemical weapons with help from the Soviet Union and Iran, as well as Western European suppliers, and even a handful of American companies, according to American diplomatic cables and declassified intelligence records. You have amassed one of the largest supplies of chemical weapons in the world.
To have or not to have is a possibility, but it depends on what the media say is nonsense, or to depend on some of the reports of the intelligence is nonsense, and that has proven when they invaded Iraq 10 years ago, and they said Iraq has stockpile of WMD, and it was proven after the invasion that was false. It was fraud. So we cannot depend on what one magazine wrote. But at the end, I said it's not something not to be discussed with anyone.
You accept that the world believes you do have a stockpile of chemical weapons.
Who?
The world.
We
the
didn't
United
discuss
States and other powers who also have chemical weapons.
It's not about what they believe in, it's about what the reality that we have. And this reality, we own it. We don't have to discuss it.
Speaking of reality, what was the reality on August 21st? What happened in your judgment?
We're not in the area where the alleged chemical attack was happened. As it alleged, we're not sure that anything happened.
Even at this date, you are not sure that chemical weapons, even though you have seen the videotape, even though you've seen the bodies, even though your own officials have been there.
I haven't finished. Our soldiers in another area were attacked chemically. Our soldiers. They went to the hospital as casualties because of chemical weapons. But in the area where they said the government used chemical weapons, we only had video and we only have pictures and allegations. We're not there. Our forces, our police, our institutions don't exist. How can you talk about what happened if you don't have evidences? We're not like the American administration. We're not social media administration or government. We are the government that deal with reality. Well, when we have evidences, we will announce.
Well, as you know, Secretary Kerry has said there is evidence that they saw rockets fired from a region controlled by your forces into a region controlled by the rebels. They have evidence from satellite photographs of that. They have evidence of a message that was intercepted about chemical weapons, and that soon thereafter there were other intercepted messages. So Secretary Kerry has presented what he concludes is conclusive evidence.
No, he presented his confidence and he presented his convictions. It's not about confidence, it's about evidence. The Russians have completely opposite evidence that the missiles were thrown from area where the rebels control. That reminds me about what Kerry said, about the big lie that Colin Powell said in front of the world on satellites about the WMD in Iraq before going to war. When he said, this is our evidence, actually he gave false evidence. In this case, Kerry didn't even present any evidence. He talked, we have evidence, and he didn't present anything. Not yet, nothing so far.
Well,
not single shred of evidence. Yeah.
Do you have some remorse for those bodies, those people? It is said to be up to at least 1,000 or perhaps 1,400 who were in Eastern Ghouta who died.
We feel pain for every Syrian victim.
But what about victims of this assault from chemical warfare?
Dead is dead. Killing is killing. Crime is crime. When you feel pain about their family, about the loss that you have in your country. Whether one person killed, or 100, or 1,000. It's a loss. It's a crime. It's a moral issue. We have family that we sit with, family that they love their dear ones. It's not about how they killed. It's about they are dead now. This is the bad thing.
Has there been any remorse or sadness on behalf of the Syrian people for what happened?
I think sadness prevails in Syria now. We don't feel anything else but sadness because we have this killing every day, whether chemical or whether with any kind. It's not about how. We feel with it every day.
But this was indiscriminate, and children were killed, and people who said goodbye to their children in the morning didn't see them and will never see them again.
You mean which
in Ghouta.
In Ghouta?
Yes.
That's the case every day in Syria. That's why we have to stop the killing. That's why we have to stop the killing. But what indiscriminate you're talking about? You said
well, the fact that chemical warfare is indiscriminate in who it kills.
Do you have evidence that there was
innocents as well as combatants?
Yeah, but you're not talking about evidence now. You're not talking about facts. We are talking about allegation. So we're not sure that if there's chemical weapon used and who used it. We cannot talk about virtual thing. We have to talk about facts.
It is said that your government delayed the United Nations observers from getting to Ghouta, and that you denied and delayed the Red Cross and the Red Crescent. from getting there to make observations and to help?
The opposite happened. Your government delayed because we asked for delegation in March 2012 when the first attack happened in Aleppo in the north of Syria, and they delayed it till just a few days before Al-Ghouta when they sent those team. And the team itself said in his letter, in his report, that he did everything as he wanted. There was not a single obstacle.
But they have said they were delayed in getting there. They wanted to be there earlier.
No. There was a conflict. There was fighting. There were shooting. That's it. We didn't prevent them from going anywhere. We asked them to come. Why to delay them? Even if you want to take the American story, they say we used the chemical weapons the same day the team or the investigation team came to Syria. Is it logical? It's not logical. Even if a country or army wanted to use such weapons, he should have waited a few days till the investigation finished its work. It's not logical. The whole story doesn't even hold together.
We'll come back to it. If your government did not do it, despite the evidence, who did it?
We have to be there to get evidences, like what happened in Aleppo when we have the evidences. And because the United States didn't send the team, we then send the evidences to the Russians.
But don't you want to know the answer if you don't accept the evidence so far as to who did this?
The question, who threw chemical missile the same day on our soldiers? That's the same question. Definitely not the soldiers. Soldiers doesn't throw missile on themselves. So either the rebels, the terrorists, or third party. We don't have any clue yet. We have to be there to collect the evidences, then we can give answer.
Well, the argument is made that the rebels don't have the capability of using chemical weapons. They do not have the rockets and they do not have the supply of chemical weapons that you have, so therefore they could not have done it.
No, first of all, they have rockets, and they've been throwing rockets on Damascus for months.
That carry chemical weapons?
Rockets,
right.
Rockets in general. They have the means, first. Second, the sarin gas that they've been talking about for the last 2 weeks is very primitive gas. You can have it done.
Sarin gas?
Sarin gas. You can have it done in the backyard of a house. It's very primitive gas. So it's not something complicated.
But this was not primitive. This was a terrible use of chemical weapons.
Third, they used it in Aleppo in the northern of Syria. Fourth, there's video on YouTube where the terrorists clearly make trial on a rabbit and kill the rabbit and said, this is how we're going to kill the Syrian people. Fifth, there's a new video about one of those women who they consider as a rebel or fighter or whatever, work with those terrorists, and she said they didn't tell us how to use and that use the chemical weapons, and one of those weapons exploded in one of the tunnels and killed 12. That's what she said. Those are the evidences that we have. Anyway, the party who accused, he's the one who has to bring evidences. The United States accused Syria, and because they accused, you have to bring evidence. This, first of all. We have to find evidences when we are there as government.
What evidence would be sufficient for you?
What evidence?
Would be sufficient. What evidence would prove the case for you?
For example, in Aleppo, we had the missile itself and the material and the sample from the sand, from the soil, and the sample from the blood.
But the argument is made that you bombarded, your forces bombarded Ghouta soon thereafter with the intent of covering up evidence.
Okay, how could bombardment cover the evidence? Technically, it doesn't work. How? This is stupid, to be frank. This is very stupid.
But you acknowledge the bombardment.
Of course, there was fight. That happened every day. Now you can have it. But let's talk. They have indications. Let me just finish this point, because how can you use WMD while your troops only 100 meters away from it? Is it logical? It doesn't happen. It cannot be used like this. Anyone who's not military knows this fact. Why do you use chemical weapons while you're advancing? Last year was much more difficult than this year, and we didn't use it.
There is this question, too. If it was not you, does that mean that you don't have control of your own chemical weapons and that perhaps they are falling into the hands of other people who might want to use them?
That implies that we have chemical weapons first.
Yes.
That implies that it's being used second. So we cannot answer this question until we answer the first part and the second part. Third, let's presume that a country or army have these weapons. These kind of armaments cannot be used by infantry, for example, or by anyone. This kind of armament should be used by specialized units. So it cannot be in the hand of anyone.
Well, exactly, and that's the point.
Which is controlled centrally.
So you were saying that if, in fact, your government did it, you would know about it and would have approved it.
I'm talking about general case.
Okay,
everywhere
generally you're saying,
world.
if, in fact, it happened, I would have known about it and approved it.
Generally.
That's the nature of centralized power.
In every country, yes. And we are part of every country. I'm talking about the general rules. Because I cannot discuss with this point with you in details unless I'm telling you what we have and what we don't have. Something I'm not going to discuss, as I said at the very beginning. Because this is a military issue that could not be discussed.
Do you question the New York Times article I read to you? Saying that you had a stockpile of chemical weapons? You're not denying that?
No, we don't say yes, we don't say no, because as long as it's classified, it shouldn't be discussed, whether yes or not.
The United States is prepared to launch a strike against your country because they believe chemical weapons are so abhorrent that anybody who uses them crosses a red line, and that therefore, if they do that, they have to be taught a lesson so that they will not do it again.
What red line?
A red line of the use of chemical weapons against your own people.
Who drew it?
The president says it was not just him, that the world has drawn it in their revulsion against the use of chemical weapons, that the world has drawn that red line.
It's not the world, because Obama drew that line, and Obama can draw a line for himself and for his country, not for other countries. We have our red lines, like our sovereignty and our independence. While if you want to talk the world red lines, United States used uranium-depleted uranium in Iraq. Israel used white phosphorus in Gaza. And nobody said anything. What about the red lines? We don't see red lines. It's political red lines.
The president is prepared to strike, and perhaps we'll get the authorization of Congress or not. The question then is, would you give up chemical weapons if it would prevent the president from authorizing a strike? If that is a deal you would accept.
Again, you always imply that we have chemical weapons.
I have to, because that's the assumption of the president.
Yeah.
That is his assumption, and he is the one who will order the strike.
It's his problem if he has an assumption. But for us in Syria, we have principles. We'll do anything to prevent the region from another crazy war. It's not only Syria, because it will start in Syria.
You'll do anything to prevent the region from having another crazy war.
Yes.
You recognize the consequences for you if there is a strike.
It's not about me. It's about the region.
Well, it's about your country. It's about your people.
Of course. My country and me, we are part of this region. We're not separated. You cannot discuss it as Syria or as me. It should be as part, as a whole, as comprehensive. That's how we have to look at it.
Some ask, why would you do it? It's a stupid thing to do if you're going to bring a strike down on your head by using chemical weapons. Others say you do it because, A, you're desperate, or in the alternative, you do it because you want other people to fear you. Yeah. Because these are such fearful weapons that if the world knows you have them, and specifically your opponents in Syria, the rebels, then you have gotten away with it and they will live in fear. And that therefore the president has to do something.
You cannot be desperate when the army is making advancement. That should have happened if, I said, if we take into consideration that this presumption is correct and this is reality. You use it when you're in desperate situation. Our position is much better than before. So this is not correct.
You think you're winning the war?
I don't know what winning is a subjective word, but we are making advancement. This is the correct word. Because winning for some people is when you finish completely, when you win completely.
And the argument is made that if you're winning, it is because of the recent help you've gotten from Iran and from Hezbollah and additional supplies that have come to your side. People from outside of Syria supporting you in the effort against the rebels.
Iran doesn't have any soldier in Syria, so how could Iran help me?
Supplies, weaponry.
That's all before the crisis. We always have this kind of cooperation.
Hezbollah fighters have been here.
Hezbollah fighters on the
from
border
outside of the country.
Only on the border with Lebanon, where the terrorists attacked them. On the border with Lebanon, This is where Hezbollah retaliated, and this is where we have cooperation, and that's good.
Hezbollah forces are in Syria today.
On the border area with Lebanon, where they want to protect themselves and cooperate with us. But they don't exist all over Syria. They cannot exist all over Syria anyway, for many reasons. But they exist on the borders.
What advice are you getting from the Russians? About this war, about how to end this war?
Every friend of Syria is looking for peaceful solution. And we are convinced about that. We have this advice, and without this advice, we are convinced about it.
Do you have a plan to end the war?
Of course.
Which is?
At the very beginning, it was fully political. When we had these terrorists, the first part of the same plan, which is political, should start with stopping the smuggling of terrorists coming from abroad, stopping the logistic support, the money, all kind of supports coming to these terrorists. This is the first part. Second, you can have national dialogue where different Syrian parties sit and discuss the future of Syria. Third, you will have the interim government or transitional government.
So you would meet with rebels?
Then you'll have the final elections, parliamentary elections, and you're going to have the presidential election.
But the question is, would you meet with rebels today to discuss a negotiated settlement?
In the initiative that we issued at the beginning of this year, we said every party with no exceptions.
So
as long as they give up their armaments.
But you'll meet with the rebels and anybody who is fighting against you if they give up their weapons.
Yeah, we don't have problem at all.
But then they will say, you're not giving up your weapons, why should we give up our weapons?
Does the government give up its weapon? Have you heard about that before?
No, but rebels don't normally give up their weapons either during the negotiation. They do that after a successful...
The armament of the government is legal armament. Any other armament is not legal. So how can you compare? It's completely different.
There is an intense discussion going on about all the things we're talking about in Washington, where if there's a strike, it will emanate from the United States' decision to do this. What do you want to say in this very important week in America and in Washington to the American people, to members of Congress, to the President of the United States?
I think the most important part of this now is, let's say, the American people, but the polls show that the majority now don't want a war anywhere, not only against Syria. But the Congress is going to vote about this in a few days, and I think the Congress is elected by the people and represent the people and work for their interests. The first question that they should ask themselves, what do wars give America? Since Vietnam till now, nothing. No political gain, no economic gain, no good reputation. The United States is at all time, the credibility is at all-time low. So this war is against the interests of the United States. Why? First of all, because this is the war that's going to support Al-Qaeda and the same people that kill Americans in the 11th of September. The second thing that we want to tell to the Congress that they should ask, and that's what we expect. We expect them to ask this administration about the evidence that they have regarding the chemical story and allegations that they presented. I wouldn't tell the president or any other official because we were disappointed by their behavior recently because we expected this administration different from Bush's administration. They are adopting the same doctrine with different accessories. That's it. So we expect, if we want to expect something from this administration, is not to be weak, to be strong, to say that we don't have evidence, that we have to obey the international law, that we have to go back to the Security Council and the United Nations.
Question remains, what can you say to the president who believes chemical weapons were used and were used by your government, that this will not happen again?
I will tell him very simply, present what you have as evidence to the public. Be transparent.
And if he does?
If he does.
If he presents that evidence?
This is where you can discuss the evidence, but he doesn't have. He didn't present it because he doesn't have. Kerry doesn't have. No one in your administration have. If they had it, they would have presented it to you as media from the first day.
They have presented it to the Congress.
Nothing.
They
Nothing
have
was
shown the
presented.
Congress what they have and the evidence they have from satellites, intercepted messages, and the like.
Nothing presented. Nothing has been presented so far.
They have presented it to Congress, sir.
You're a reporter. Get this evidences and show it to the public in your country.
They're presenting they're presenting it to the public's representatives. You don't show your evidence and what you're doing and your plans to other people that within your own council. They're showing it to the people's representatives who have to vote on an authorization to strike. And if they don't find the evidence sufficient.
First of all, we have the precedent of Colin Powell 10 years ago. When he showed the evidence, it was false and it was forged. This is first. Second, you want me to believe American evidence and don't believe the indications that we have. We live here. This is our reality.
Your indications are that what?
Sorry?
What your indications are that it was...
That the rebels or the terrorists used the chemical weapons in northern of Aleppo 5 months ago.
And on August 21st?
No. That was before. That was in March. On the 21st, again, they used it against our soldiers in our area where we control it. And our soldiers went to the hospital, and you can see them if you want.
But the area where that attack took place was controlled by rebel forces.
That you're talking about the chemical attacks?
Yes.
Yeah, what if they have stockpiles and they exploded because of the bombardment? What if they use the missile by coincidence and attack themselves by mistake?
Let me talk.
Or by coincidence, by mistake.
Yes. Let me move to the question of whether a strike happens, and I touched on this before. You have had fair warning. Have you prepared by moving possible targets? Are you moving targets within civilian populations, all the things that you might have done if you have time to do that, and you have had clear warning that this might be coming?
Syria is in state of war since its land was occupied for more than 4 decades. And the nature of the frontier in Syria implies that most of the army is in inhabited area. Most of the centers are in inhabited area. You hardly find any military base in distant area from the cities unless it's airport or something like this. But most of the military bases or centers are within inhabited area.
Will there be attacks against American bases in the Middle East if there's an airstrike?
You should expect everything. You should expect everything. Not necessarily through the government. It's not only the governments are not the only player in this region. You have different parties, you have different factions, you have different ideology. You have everything in this region now. So you have to expect that.
Tell me what you mean by expect everything.
Expect every action.
Including chemical warfare?
That depends if the rebels or the terrorists in this region or any other group have it. It could happen, I don't know. I'm not fortune teller to tell you what's going to happen.
But we'd like to know more, and I think the President would like to know, American people would like to know, if there's an attack, what might be the repercussions and who might be engaged in those repercussions.
Before the 11th of September, in my discussions with many officials in the United States, some of them are congressmen, I used to say that don't deal with the terrorists as playing games. It's a different story. You're going to pay the price if you're not wise in dealing with the terrorists. So nobody expects, we said there are going to be repercussions of the mistaken way of dealing with it, of treating the terrorism. But nobody expected 11th of September. So you cannot expect, it's difficult for anyone to tell you what's going to happen. It's an area where everything is on the brink of explosion. You have to expect everything.